there was, Taliban activity in the region. Summer 2011, I grabbed my squad and we start moving up very steep valley. We had somebody from the support company who wanted to come out on patrol, not an infantryman. And he had loaded up his body with Mountain Dew and Monsters and cigarettes and not water. The moment the shooting starts, the kid goes down as a heat cat. We dumped all of our water for this kid so they could take care of him as a heat casualty. So we do this whole multi-hour gunfight thing with no water. We get to the point where I'm getting wonky, and I could tell that my guys are getting wonky because we're super dehydrated, and we have to fall back to the position of the rest of the company. We had reached the limit of our physical capability, but the only reason we could do it and then safely get back to our company's position was because everybody was fit. It was pretty a good example of if you hydrate, you eat well, and you work out, you're going to be good on a battlefield. If you don't do any of those things and you load yourself up with, caffeine, nicotine, and sugar, you're not going to be worth a shit when the shooting starts.
This is Andrew Vontz, and you're listening to Choose the Hard Way. This is the podcast about how hard things build stronger humans who have more fun. And this is the United States of Sweat with, as always, my very special guest host, Jonathan Kaplan of the Writing With newsletter, which you can find on Substack, and Right Cadence Strategies. Jonathan, welcome.
Andrew, great to be here. Great to be with you. Our guest today, Graham Platner, the next United States Senator from Maine, to talk about working out and well-being.
I'm here today live from the cancer floor at Maine Health Hospital in Portland, Maine, where I'm 3 days into being cured and 3 days into a 5-day chemo drip that's going on behind me right now. If you're watching on video, I'll share more about my cancer journey later, and you can go to my Substack, alwaysthehardway.substack.com, or at hardwaypod on Instagram for a big health update. I just want to say thanks for all of the positivity and support that I've received from you all. Please keep it coming wherever you listen. Please hit 5 stars and subscribe and pass this episode along to a friend. Jonathan, with over $1 trillion in transactions to date, blockchain.com is your trusted partner on your crypto journey. Whether you're a veteran or just getting into the action, you can go to blockchain.com to get started today. No experience required. I'm not going to be on a bike for a minute, but when I do ride, and I'm looking forward to riding again, on the other side of this, Lauf is the Apple of bike design, and they make elegant products that just work better than everything else. They're a hell of a lot of fun to ride. You can check them out at laufcycles.com. You can find me on Instagram at HardwayPod, on Substack at alwaysthehardway.substack.com. Find Jonathan at Johnny99Kaplan. His Substack is Writing With, and you can find Graham at Graham for Maine.
You're in the middle of this hotly contested Senate campaign. How long are your days, and what does taking care of yourself and your well-being look like?
Generally, the day starts around 7:30 or 8 a.m., and I'm usually not home. Like last night, I got home at about midnight. I used to be a serious gym rat. I used to work out essentially every single day. These days, the best thing I can do is get my sleep. And that's the one thing that I've actually been able to really kind of still focus on for the most part, is getting anywhere between 7 and 8 hours per night, which kind of keeps me energized and going. But I mean, it's intense, and it's consistent. And that's once the day starts, it's either phone calls, it's meetings, it's public events. This is all also kind of by choice. I mean, the campaign that we're running, which is very much a campaign that is built around going out and being accessible to people. It just requires your time. You have to go out and be accessible. You got to go into communities. You got to talk to people in the communities that they live in. And that just requires an immense amount of time and a commitment to thinking that that's a necessary part of building a real political movement, which I think it is. And but the trade-off is that there's very little time in the day for frankly, exercise and healthy eating. I am looking forward to winning this thing and being able to have some more structure in my existence. But for the time being, it's just, it's very much it's the Winston Churchill saying, when you're going through hell, you just keep going. And that's exactly what we keep doing. So.
And Graham, at the end of a day that's going from 7:30 in the morning until midnight, the average person would have a pretty hard time, especially with the stakes being so high, switching off, downregulating, and going to bed. How do you go to bed?
I always read a little bit, even if it's just a couple pages. I get off my. And the other problem with this is your phone and screens is just a necessity. You're constantly engaging with the press. You're constantly engaging with other political figures, engaging with people. So like your phone is. I used to try to work really hard to structure the amount of time I spend on my phone. It's like essentially impossible now. So when I get home, I always try to I lay in bed. I do some breathing exercises. I do a little bit of reading, and I sort of feel myself in my body, doing some old fashioned, just being present in the moment. And usually I can have my brain shut down enough to go to sleep. The upside is I'm exhausted. So it's usually fairly easy to pass out, but yeah.
Yeah, Jonathan and I also love to read. One of the books that I'm reading right now to my son, who is 9, because he likes to hear very intellectual, complex books with big words that helps him fall asleep. So we're reading The Origin of Consciousness and the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind by Julian Jaynes, a few pages at a time every night, which honestly I've been trying to get through for 20 years, and I'm now 400 pages in. So shout out to my son, Sam, age 9. What are you reading these days to go to bed?
I'm a big, my wife thinks this is very weird because she's like, why don't you read something that takes your mind off politics? But it's difficult for me to do that. I currently just read a book called Invisible Doctrine. It's a history of neoliberalism, relatively quick. I read it on my day off. That's my version of a day off.
That's awesome.
And then I'm currently in the middle of the last rereading the last book in a series about the Roosevelt administration. So I'm usually but I'm just gonna say I'm usually reading like 4 books at a time. I sort of bounce around, and then that usually does it for me. My wife's always like, why do you not just read something like that really kind of makes you not think? And I'm like, it's more relaxed. It's more relaxing to actually read about things I find interesting than to just kind of pretend that I care about these fictional characters. But
yeah, just wait 10 years. Maybe you'll start reading like I do, trashy thrillers and Icelandic mystery murders and what have you.
To be like, I have a soft spot for kind of high-minded fantasy and also science fiction. I'm a big fan of sci-fi, but these days I don't know. I feel like I've got such a limited time to read that right. I just don't want to waste it.
Yeah, I feel that. I'm quite into the new weird. I'm reading the China Meeville Boss Live trilogy right now. I don't know if you've read that one.
Yeah, China's amazing.
Yeah, I just got turned on to him in the last 2 years. Yeah.
Spectacular writer. Yeah. He's
and a political thinker.
A very, very, very deep political thinker. And I like I'm always curious about the nexus of politics and culture. And he's a really great example of that.
Absolutely. So Graham, with the schedule right now, there's not a lot of time to do anything but what you're doing, which is being on your way to being the next U.S. Senator for the state of Maine, which I'm 100% confident that you will do. Is there a lot of movement in the course of a day, though? Like, do you ever say, I'm going to just walk around the block? What are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, weirdly enough, I walk a lot now. Mostly because we're doing visits to, I was just at the University of New England's medical school. We did a campus tour, and so there is a kind of, and we're always moving from one venue to another venue. It is the movement's actually fairly constant, which is nice. I mean, the downside is Maine's a big state, as you know. So I do spend a lot of time in the truck. So a lot of time just sitting, making phone calls when we have reception, and bouncing around the state of Maine. I mean, you know how rural Maine is. So
I do.
But it's so like that part. I sit a lot, but then I also do move. I walk a lot in the course of the day, which thank God. So I'll be. I don't know why anybody would want to do this a different way. I mean, the idea of campaigning being sitting in a room and just taking meetings and begging people for money versus going out and being active and running around the state and talking to everybody. One of those
Right.
is fun. The other one sounds pretty miserable, but there are a lot of politicians that only do the first one, which I find to be weird. But
Yeah, yeah. And cell coverage is a big challenge in Maine. I don't know if you've noticed this on recent visits to Hope, but the Hatchet Mountain Tower now has consumer cellular. So for the
Yep.
first time since I moved there 3 years ago, we have cell service, which is game changing. Yeah,
it's pretty.
it's amazing. Yeah,
Amy
inside
lives
baseball.
Amy's family. Actually, I woke up in Hope this morning. So
Oh, awesome.
yeah.
That's a great
Nice.
place to wake up.
Sure. So just going back to a previous part of your life, when you were in the Marines and the Army, what did training look like for you on an average day? What were you focused on?
Yeah, I mean, when I was young in the infantry, this was kind of like before the shift into things like CrossFit and functional fitness. I mean, when I was in the grunts back in the old days, it was very much you either ran a lot and did a ton of cardio, or you were like a gym rat kind of guy doing bro splits and you just kind of standard weightlifting. I was very much on the running a lot side. I ran a ton in the Marine Corps. And it was mostly because like my experience in combat was, I mean, cardio's big, if you're gassing out, it's as long as you're like basically strong, you can function. Cardio is huge. That being said, after I left the Corps, I was the Corps in '08, right when like CrossFit started to explode. And I actually got really, I don't know if there's a guy, I forget his name, but he had a program called Mountain Athlete.
Oh, Rob Shaul.
Oh, yeah.
Rob Shaul. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I do his programming. It's awesome.
it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So I get out of the Corps. I'm out for around a year, go back into the Army. And at that point, I'd been going to CrossFit classes. I had really got into this kind of more functional fitness, being strong, but also fast, being able to kind of thread that needle. And then really getting exposed to the concept of programming. Because I mean, when I was in the infantry, you just like wake up, regardless of what time you went to sleep or regardless of what you had to consume the night before. Wake up at 5:30, 6 o'clock, go PT, and but you ran almost every day, and then calisthenics, lots of pull-ups, lots of push-ups, some weight stuff, but. For me, it was limited. By the time the idea that you were doing it in the service of like a more structured program, though, I was not exposed to that. And it was only later after I got out and started doing CrossFit stuff and then really mountain athlete stuff, which then later turned into, I think, tactical athlete or whatever it was called. Like Rob Shaul's programming, I did that in my work up to Afghanistan. He had a whole like Afghan workup for, frankly, running up and down mountains. So I did that on the workup. And then when I was in Afghanistan, he had a whole thing for like patrol-based fitness, where if you don't have access to weights, if you don't have access to like dumbbells, sandbag stuff, being able to, but I ordered in Afghanistan, I ordered a bunch of bumper plates, like off of, I think I got them from Rogue, and they like shipped them to Afghanistan. Yeah, they got like
That's
delivered.
incredible.
I mean, we're at this little patrol base out in the middle of nowhere, and the guys that delivered that mail run were very displeased with my existence because they're like, "Who the fuck ordered something that literally weighs hundreds of pounds?" I was like, "It's for the gym, dog. It's good." And then after I got back from that, I was training for Special Forces selection for a while. I switched over to 19th Group before I got out of the Army.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I spent my last year in the Army with 19th Group in West Virginia, and I was just prepping. I was just prepping for selection. So lots of rucking, lots of weightlifting to like keep my joints strong. So because rucking can be hard on your knees. So a lot of fairly high weight, but also high repish, like squats, deadlifts, that kind of stuff, combined with just an immense amount of cardio. So. And then I got out of the service and decided I was just going to lift weights and stop doing cardio, and got really into, I cycled 5-3-1 for years.
Yeah. Jim Wendler, shout out.
Yep. I mean, Wendler's programming was, and I did that for like 6 or 7 straight years. And I got strong. By my mid 30s, I felt really, really good. But
right.
yeah, so.
So, Graham, going back to when you're actually deployed downrange, it sounds like at times, I mean, man, you like called in the goods from Rogue. That's awesome. Given that it sounds like you were patrolling a lot, you were actively in combat frequently, what was your mentality around the training you were doing, and what specific attributes did you seek to cultivate for your job?
I mean, for me, it was like I took my job in the infantry very seriously. I viewed myself as a professional soldier. That was what I did. And obviously, physical fitness is it's an intrinsic part of being capable in combat. Um,
Right.
it also, but I mean, but even like what I wanted to make sure is that physically, when the moment came where we had to like jump into gear, that like I was going to be ready. And I was a squad leader, so I was also trying to show a level of commitment to this work. So like the Joes under me were going to want to like do that kind of thing too. And so part of it was just kind of being physically capable. And on that front, it really is threading that needle of like, uh, long-term cardio while also being able to go hands-on with somebody if you need to,
Right.
being strong enough to lift a casualty, being strong enough to throw gear over a wall, like stuff like that, which is, I mean, honestly, is actually fairly important. So but then there was the mental component as well, and I think the mental component honestly was more like I tried to set the example of working out on days even when we were tired, where you went out on foot patrol, you're a little bit exhausted, but you still had to go into the gym, swing the kettlebell around, do a little bit of weight stuff, just to kind of maintain that sort of discipline and commitment to being ready for the next round. But it was, yeah, I mean, being serving in the infantry is an exhausting experience when you're deployed. But I always tried to I wanted to like kind of inculcate this sort of mental commitment to just always moving forward. No matter how brutal it's feeling, no matter how gassed out you are, you always got to push. And that was, it's something I always loved about Shaul's programming is there were just work capacity days where you're just
Right.
like, it's like the worst thing ever, and you vomit, and then you
Yeah.
still have like another 30 minutes of work after you puked. But it's important, and it's important to understand to like train yourself and also the people you're leading, that even when you think you are absolutely done, that you are fully smoked, you can keep going. You have the capacity to keep, and you cannot stop. And I think there was that kind of mental toughness that my exercise regime was also trying to build.
Graham, it's funny. My younger brother Tony flew out from Oakland to be with me for this 5-day chemo treatment I'm doing in the hospital, and he and I both have done mountain tactical programming for a long time. And I actually brought my mountain tactical sandbag and my 25-pound dumbbells so we could do his get ups and Scotty Bobs and
Yeah.
everything outside of the hotel room and get in his ruck. So we certainly love Rob's programming. I am really curious, again, when you were deployed and you were seeing action in combat, can you think of moments when the fitness that you were building was life-saving?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So I mean, there's one very specific moment. We were co-located with the French Foreign Legion unit. They were part of an operational mentorship liaison team. So we had a co-located Afghan National Army company, and they were advised by these French Foreign Legionnaires. And there had been an incident. Someone had been a member of the Afghan government had been essentially yoked up on the side of the road and killed,
Oh man.
at the bottom of a valley, which was in our AO. So the whole idea was we were going to go up into this valley, we were going to meet with the locals, we were going to kind of see what was going on, because clearly there was Taliban activity in the region. And so we showed, we're just there. I mean, this is 2011, summer 2011. So we're definitely on this kind of like the Afghans lead, and we're kind of there in support. Although when the shooting starts, that would always get a little bit debatable, which was the case for this one. So we're going up this valley, the shooting starts. I grab my squad, and I grab my squad, and we start moving up the valley. And it's a very steep valley. and we start moving up one side, and I look over to the other side of the valley, and I see the French Foreign Legionnaires have essentially broken off from their Afghan unit that's kind of just hanging out and not doing anything, and they start pushing up. Our comms weren't working, but we could see each other, so we were doing hand and arm signals. I just had this moment where I'm like, all right, well, these guys are professional soldiers. So if we lay down covering fire and then they're going to move. I mean, it's just old fashioned fire and maneuver. And so that's what we did. They'd push forward, and then we'd hear their guns pick up, and then we'd pick up, and we'd start moving forward, and we just leapfrog, engaging about, I think in the end it was probably about a squad size of Taliban for the next couple hours. And like, we're the only ones. Everybody else has stayed back there. So it's me and my squad and these like foreign legionnaires on the other side, and we don't have comms with each other, but we're kind of just trusting that the other guy knows what they're doing. And I had a good relationship with these guys. I'd gotten to know them really well. They knew my background. They knew that I came from a long-range surveillance unit, and that I'd seen a lot of combat in Iraq before this. So like, we had a warm and fuzzy about each other's soldiering competency. And eventually, we get to a point where we're no longer engaging the enemy. We don't have comms. The Legionnaires are like the valley has started to open up. So we're getting pretty far away from each other. And we're like, all right, it's time to go back. But before this happened, right before it happened, we had somebody from the support company who wanted to come out on patrol, not an infantryman. And he had loaded up his body with Mountain Dew and Monsters and cigarettes and not water. And the moment the shooting starts, the kid goes down as a heat cat. So we dumped all of our water, for this kid, so they could take care of him as a heat casualty. So we do this whole multi-hour gunfight thing with no water. And I get to the point where I'm starting to I'm looking, I'm getting wonky, and I can tell that my guys are getting kind of wonky because we're super dehydrated. And then we have to fall back to the position of the rest of the company. And I'm very grateful that everybody in my squad was quite honestly very fit, because I don't think we could not have sustained this. We had reached kind of the limit of our physical capability, and we were dehydrated and we were banged up. But the only reason we could do it and then safely get back to our company's position was because everybody was fit. And the fact that, the kid that wasn't fit went down within 5 minutes of the fight starting as a heat casualty. For me, it was pretty good example of if you hydrate, you eat well, and you work out, you're going to be good on a battlefield. If you don't do any of those things and you load yourself up with caffeine, nicotine, and sugar, you're not going to be worth a shit when the shooting starts, which was in fact the case. So
conversely,
did you carry him back?
Oh yeah, I mean they had to carry the kid back to the gun trucks way back on the road. I mean it was
I see.
It was a real frig. It was a real pain. But it was so that was and honestly, amusingly enough, so that was one of the first real fights that happened. And I was with a National Guard company from Iowa, and so for a lot of the guys in the company, this was their first real serious combat action. And afterwards, there was this they were and I was kind of as an NCO, I was I made my kids shoot. I made them work out. I made them rehearse. I made them take their job seriously, which is not always what 19-year-olds want to do. Sometimes you just want to lay in the brack and watch a movie or play video games. And after this happened, there was a little bit of all right, thanks, Sergeant. Thanks for making us be prepared for this, because when it came, we were prepared. It was good. But
yeah, Graham, conversely, did you ever have a moment when you felt you were not prepared enough that shaped how you trained in the future to meet the moment?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, my first deployment, I went to Iraq with less than a year after I joined the Marine Corps. So I joined the Marine Corps in February of 2004, and I deployed to outside of Fallujah in January of 2005. I'm 20. I was 20 years old. And like I said, back then, fitness, it was old school fitness. It was we run a lot and we do calisthenics. And we get to Iraq and we start kind of operating. And I felt very kind of not prepared, like both physically, but also almost tactically. I like the Marine Corps is pretty good, but like I'd only been in for less than a year. Like I was like, oh my God, like it's and you know, we had very good NCOs, we had good leadership and that kind. But I was, you know, just a young Marine, and it was actually that experience for me that kind of combat's already stressful. And one of the things that makes combat even more stressful is when you do not feel like you're in control. I mean, one of the best things you can do in combat is to try to slow down your breathing, slow down your heart rate, and maintain some semblance of control. Because if you go into the black, panic sets in, you start acting funny. I didn't have any of those tools. And so like the first few times I was in combat, it was very like, it was utterly terrifying. Now, granted, part of this is just you get exposed to it and, you know, you do it over and over again, eventually kind of get more used to it. But I also like learned these tools to keep my heart rate down, really focus on breathing, really focus on like kind of doing mindfulness exercises in the middle of people shooting at you. Because it's just, you're just trying to keep yourself, because you're going to make better decisions. And, you know, and also the people that are trying to kill you, they're as stressed out as you are. So if you take a second to just mellow yourself out, you're going to be able to act quicker and faster and with more intellectual capacity than they are, and that's how you're going to, you know, win fights. So there's that was to me a pretty serious moment as a young Marine of being like, I don't want to feel like this ever again. And so I then focus more on certain elements of fitness and also kind of like almost a mindset change.
And on the other side of your service, having just been in, I would imagine, hundreds of literal life and death situations with, as you said, people actively trying to kill you, how did it not inform your relationship with health, wellness, and your body going forward?
Well, you know, honestly, the thing that, so clearly I got into like regular physical fitness. But I did not develop, I think, like a healthy mindset. I mean, combat is maladaptive. Again, that's just an important thing to understand. Like, I think when you see a significant amount of combat, the mental tools, the kind of sort of just your outlook on things, your sense of humor. I mean, the things that like make you effective in high stress, violent situations are not always things going to make you effective in like the real world. In fact, it's often exactly the opposite. And when I got out, I mean, like, one, you just lose the sense of purpose. Like I had planned to kind of be a professional soldier. I thought I was going to do a career in the service. And then suddenly there I am as a 29, 30-year-old civilian, and I didn't know what to do. I had done no preparation mentally for that. And so while I still had like the physical element of like well-being, mentally, I really began to go off a cliff. And I spent a number of years in the hole. You know, the depression, anxiety, intense amounts of self-isolation, alienation, combined with, frankly, a deep disillusionment, because I began to think that the wars I took part in had literally no purpose. Like all the violence, all the suffering, everything I went through, it did nothing for the United States. It was just all of it, and that like left me with a very bitter taste in my mouth. And I had no real mental tools to handle it. This is not news to anybody. This is what happens to a lot of young men after young people, after an extensive amount of combat. And then there's just post-traumatic stress. And I was blown up a bunch, traumatic brain injury, like all that kind of stuff. And it just, you layer all of that on top of finding yourself alienated, isolated, and depressed in greater society. It was brutal. And it was going through that experience and really getting into a very dark place for a little while. When I got to come out of it through therapy and through support from the VA, I mean, the VA saved my life. The VA and moving back to my hometown in Maine is what saved my life. Hands down, end of story. And going through that process, though, like coming out of the hole and building these mental tools to kind of become more compassionate and empathetic to kind of open myself up. And I mean, the big one, this is going to sound kind of weird, but being able to like be vulnerable with other people emotionally, and understand that that actually strengthens you. It's to such an intense degree, because you get to really get to the core of who you are as a person and why you think and feel the way you do. And then when you do it with other people and you kind of open yourself up, I think it builds like a substantial amount of armor, not an armor of like keeping people out, but an armor of like letting people in and no longer having these feelings of loneliness. It was, for me, it was, I'm not happy I spent years depressed and angry. It was a brutal part of my life. It was not fun. And it was like, I do not look back on it with any kind of fondness. But at the exact same time, going through that and then coming out of it the way that I did through therapy and through building community, it really has turned me into a much more, I would say, open and stronger person, a mentally stronger person. And it's going to say, like, I often see a lot of other guys and women, men and women who had experiences like mine, who I see them with that front still up, like this kind of tough alpha vibe going on. And what I see is somebody who has not, who has still got the wrong kind of armor on. And I don't know, I almost like, I feel bad because I'm like, you shouldn't just get over it a little bit. Just understand that by being vulnerable and opening up to people, you're going to feel much better about yourself as a person.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I'm 50, Graham. And what I've found as I age, and it just becomes harder and harder to find communities of men to connect with. And I'm lucky. I have a Zen Sangha I meet with in Hope at the Sweet Tree Art School right there at the Crossroads every Sunday.
Amy used to teach at Sweet Tree.
Yeah. It's an amazing group of people. Lindsay, who runs Sweet Tree, an amazing person. And I'm part of this intergenerational community of Zen practitioners. And part of the beauty of that experience is just getting to connect with people on a very deep level. And like right now, as I'm going through this chemo treatment, in fact, my Sangha, a member of my Sangha is dropping by today. They've connected me to a Sangha here in Portland. 2 complete strangers came and sat and meditated and talked about the Dharma with me yesterday. And it becomes tougher as you age. And for anybody listening, I don't have all the answers, but I think seeking connection, as you noted, Graham, and coming out of the hole, because we live in a very divided world full of a lot of seeming disconnection. But at the end of the day, I'm just barely into my cancer journey, but it's just highlighting to me how little the differences we perceive actually exist, and that we're all humans at the end of the day, and life is very fragile.
It was something that I really treasure from my combat service, was going to parts of the world that are vastly different from the one I grew up in, and being around people who are ostensibly vastly different than like us, and then realizing that they're not. It's just realizing that they have the exact same material needs, they have the exact same kind of draw towards community and taking care of each other, and just realizing that human beings are literally just human beings, and that all human beings, every single one, everybody's experience is as valid as anybody else's, and everybody's experience is as real as anybody else's, which I think is something that we often forget about these days. There's this we become so alienated and isolated that we look at other people as if their reality is like not as valid or important or even as real as our reality. And I think that's often how we can like blame other people or otherize other people. And for me, the more that I began to kind of recognize this fact, the more I began to it became pretty core to my philosophy and my politics, that absolutely everyone deserves safety and security, and everyone deserves to live good lives. And I mean, we live on a planet that food grows out of the ground. That there is water every there's I'm sorry, this idea that we have to have all of this scarcity I mean, these are choices we make as societies and as systems. I think. I mean, I've got a fairly systemic idea of all of this, and but it's just, yeah, it is for me. The more I began to develop that feeling, this kind of deep sense of compassion and empathy for other people, and recognizing that their suffering or their joy or their sadness, all of it was as real as
Right.
anything I feel, that you can really begin to yeah, believe that we're all part of the same thing, which I do think we are.
Yeah. I mean, we
Not
don't
to
need
get
to go into
not to
the,
get too weird spiritual about it, but
no.
yeah, that's
Yeah. And it's interesting too, where spirituality, the human experience, and post-structuralism intersect. And we don't have to go down a post-structuralist wormhole here. One of the books I happen to have in the hospital with me is Yuval Noah Harari's Nexus. And I think, as we all know, and you're highlighting, Graham, difference primarily exists in this world because power structures are predicated upon stories that are for power hoarding and to give all of the resources and power to a limited group of people. And once you open your eyes and see the matrix you're living in, you just realize it's a false dichotomy. And that's why I really appreciate your point of view and the change that you're going to create as the next U.S. Senator for Maine.
thanks, man. Honestly, it means a hell of a lot.
Let me ask one final question that's along the lines of what you were talking about. But okay, so setting aside Hegseth and RFK Jr.'s politics, they're advancing a certain, yeah, the eye roll, yeah. They're advancing a certain image of what it means to be strong, to be a man. You know, what does that look like to you? What's your take on that?
Oh, all I see is masculine insecurity. I see intense amounts of people who are deeply wounded and who are using this like fake version of alpha toughness to make up for the fact that, I mean, they probably hate themselves at some level. And it's vapid. It's this purely shallow, like surface level concept of what it means to be strong. And by the way, this is a thing. This version of masculinity has been weaponized for a very long time to give people who don't want to do any deeper work, or quite frankly, who are going to benefit from it. I mean, I think there's this level where for folks who are feeling like they aren't enough, imposing their will on somebody else, like that's how you feel this sense of empowerment. Except it doesn't actually do it for you. Like it's not gonna, like, it's why Elon Musk is a deeply unhappy person while clearly being the richest man on the planet. I mean, like that, those two things should not exist. If you're the richest man on the planet, why do you just sit on Twitter and get angry all day long? You know, it's because there's a hole. There's a philosophical or emotional hole somewhere. And when I look at like Hegseth and RFK Jr., I see exactly that. The problem is, in any other place, these are just guys who like you look at in the gym and you laugh at because you know exactly what's going on. But they have access to power. And because they have access to power, we all have to now live with the horrific outcomes of their insecurity. And it's I think we need to be pushing back very much against that version of masculinity and that version of having power. It's the whole power over instead of power with. And they very much want to have power over people. They don't want to have power to work with other people. And I think, to me, power with is a far more potent version of power. It's also, I think, a far more humane and compassionate thing, which makes you better as a person, in my opinion.
So, Graham, final question. Something, as we've noted in this conversation, is really the power of relational health and the power of connecting to other people for a wide variety of reasons. As it relates to just working out, who's been your favorite workout partner you've ever had?
Ooh, best workout. Oh man, this is gonna be a hard one. It's either my buddy Travis.
You can pick more than one.
Pick 5 people.
Yeah, I'm doing 2. It's gonna be my buddy Travis, who's a dentist, and he and I would. It's fun to work out with him because we just make fun of each other. And then years ago, when I was still training for SF selection, I was training with like 2 very good friends of mine, Jesse and Josh. And we were all preparing for the exact same selection. And a friend of ours was going to Special Forces dive school, which is one of the hardest schools in the Army. And so we were just doing his training program with him. And it was an immense amount of rucking and swimming and everything else. And honestly, like we had so much, it was brutal and it was so much fun. Just months and months of an immense amount of fun. But so those would, yeah. And finding a lot of community in suffering, not like finding a lot of bonding in the fact that we had to wake up at 3:30 every morning to go swim for 3 hours and then ruck march. So, yeah.
Yeah, Graham, as I noted, my younger brother's here, and part of what's great about having him here as I began chemo treatment is he just makes fun of me at all the right times about all the right things. And as you noted, that's what a great workout partner does. What else does a great workout partner do? What do you think are the right attributes besides occasionally like almost dropping the bar on you? I think that's important.
Well, I mean, one I think is having like and I do believe this. I know some people disagree, but I think being at similar fitness levels, where you can be pushing each other, like, because if you're having an off day and your buddy's having an on day, he can get you through, and vice versa. And if you're at incredibly different fitness levels, that doesn't always work. But another one is, I think, also almost the opposite of what I just said, is having a workout buddy who's going to be like, all right, let's not do that last set of 315. Let's we're both banged up right now. We're both feel like maybe if we try to like gut this one out, one of us herniates a disc, and that's not going to be fun. So like, I think that there's having somebody who's kind of diligent on being disciplined about like your programming and not having too much ego wrapped up in it. But I think, but then also making fun of you when he knows that you actually could go a little bit further. So I mean, it's nuanced. It's a nuanced situation. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Graham, thanks so much for taking time to join us here today on United States of Sweat. And
it's my pleasure.
We wish you the best of luck in winning the primary and then being the next U.S. Senator from Maine.
Thanks a lot, guys. Really appreciate it.
Huge thanks to Graham Platner for being our guest today. Follow his path to the Senate on Instagram at Graham for Maine.
Thanks for listening to United States of Sweat, presented by Choose the Hard Way. And Jonathan, thanks so much for being here. You can follow me on Instagram at HardwayPod. Jonathan, where can people find you?
Johnny99 Kaplan on Instagram and Jonathan E. Kaplan at LinkedIn.
And you can find Graham and follow his campaign and path to the Senate at Graham for Maine. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being part of this community. And again, thank you for all of the positivity and support on my cancer journey. I'll be sharing more about that here on the podcast soon, as well as on my Substack and at HardwayPod on Instagram. Wherever you are, be grateful that you're alive and breathing, and have a great day.